At this point, dear audience, I'd like to introduce to you our first topic for today, European Sustainable Economic Recovery. This time it's different. To provide our panelists with some input and data, I invite you to answer the following poll on slido.com with the event code EIF21. Should the Green Deal remain the EU's top priority in post-COVID Europe? We will have a look at the results halfway into our panel discussion. And now, I'd like to pass the floor to Dimitar Lilkov, Research Officer at the Martens Center, who will moderate the first debate. Dimitar, over to you.
Thank you, Anna. A warm welcome from the Martens Center and our European Ideas Forum. My name is Dimitar Lilkov, and I'll be moderating our today's panel on sustainable economic recovery. The goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 will require a fundamental change in many aspects of the European economic model. Especially in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, many governments had to shift their immediate priorities. However, sustainability and climate change are certainly not off the radar. Of course, the challenge remains how to accommodate the specificities and the characteristics of certain industries and member states in achieving this transition. Our Martens Center panel today focuses on a successful economic sustainable recovery and which specific policies to put in place. In short, today we'll be talking about a successful Green Deal and a successful post-COVID recovery for the old continent. And what a lineup we have today in terms of experts. I'm really happy that today we're joined by high-profile professionals and policy makers. Our first guest is Commissioner Mairead McGuinness. She is the European Commissioner for Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets Union since 2020. Before that, Mrs. McGuinness was Ireland's longest-serving member of the European Parliament, starting in the early 2000s. She was also first Vice President of the European Parliament, part of Fine Gael and the EPP. Commissioner McGuinness, it's a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be with you.
We are also joined by Esther de Lange, Member of the European Parliament and Vice Chair of the European People's Party. Mrs. de Lange is one of the most outspoken parliamentarians when it comes to topics related to sustainability, agriculture, and the European Green Deal, a long-serving friend of the Martens Center as well. Thank you for joining us, Esther.
It's great to be here and to see some people in real life. That's always a pleasure.
Next on my right is Fleur, Corporate Affairs Director for Europe at AB Inbev, responsible for public affairs and the corporate social responsible agenda of the company. Previously, Fleur worked on trade policy, and she was also part of the political cabinet of a Belgian minister. Thank you, Fleur, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, also connecting digitally is Belet, currently cabinet expert at the cabinet of Commissioner Dubravka, Šuica. Before this position in the cabinet, Ivo served as a member of the European Parliament for 3 full mandates after an extensive career in journalism. Ivo, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Dimitar. Thanks for the invitation, and it's an honor.
Before we start, a couple of housekeeping rules. We will start the panel with very short kickoffs by each of the speakers. This is a live panel, so dear friends, feel free to tweet, post comments, answer our Slido question, and be as active as possible. So, let's kick it off. Commissioner McGuinness, the floor is yours for your opening statement.
Well, thank you again for allowing me to share some thoughts here today. And I'm going to be brief and to the point. I think it's interesting, the title of this panel, it's got a question mark after this time it's different. And I don't think there should be a question mark, because I think this time it really is different. If you look to the crisis that we are now trying to recover from, it arose because of a virus. It's global. We were not prepared for it. But we found that with this natural, if you like, event, both our societies and our economies and our businesses have really been hit very severely. So this is a new element to the crisis. The second, if you like, difference is that we are now very committed politically to achieving very ambitious targets around climate neutrality, but also targets around biodiversity loss and environmental degradation. So in fact, the scene is set for where the future needs to be, and therefore we need to direct all our energies towards a more sustainable recovery. Because I think if we were to waste this crisis, what would happen is we would pour money into the status quo. And I'm afraid the status quo is not sustainable. However, the change towards sustainability is huge. And therefore, we need not only to talk about the money behind it and what is required, but equally to talk about mindsets and making sure we leave no one behind. And I think if we get all of those elements together, we will have a sustainable economic recovery post-COVID. And what that will mean is that the changes we bring about through this more sustainable orientation will mean that we have long-term security. It will mean we will answer questions of a younger generation concerned about the future of the planet. What struck me in reading some information around the whole climate challenge is that we know, because the UN World Meteorological Organization has warned us, that there's a 40% chance that the yearly average global temperature could reach 1.5 degree level in at least one of the next 5 years. And there's a 90% probability that one of those next 5 years could be the warmest ever on record. So we know what the future holds if we do nothing. So what do we have to do? And very briefly, there isn't any sector of our society that will not be impacted by this transition. We can look at that as a challenge or an opportunity. And for me, what I would like to say to business, both large, small, and medium, is that this should be an opportunity to be sustainable for the long term. And those who don't get on this, if you like, train, won't have a future. So what it means is that in my role as the Commissioner responsible for financial stability is to make sure that we get money, private sector funds flowing towards sustainable investments. And to do that, we need to make sure that companies report on sustainability. So what are they doing? What are their plans? And that the financial industry has access to that information, but equally that the financial sector reports on what it's doing towards this sustainable agenda. So we've been putting together almost pieces of a very complicated but important puzzle, so that we bring together all the information that the market needs, and then we allow that market information to give investors choice around where they want to put their money. And at the heart of all of this is our EU taxonomy on sustainable economic activities. It classifies in a very specific way what is sustainable for the future. And I think that really today's discussion is about making sure that we bring people with us on this journey, that we acknowledge the concerns of businesses, struggling with the pandemic and looking towards a recovery, and that we ensure that they get the finance from it, whether that is through capital markets or through bank funding, and that they have a clear focus on what they need to do. If we put all of these pieces together, then the European Union not only will lead, but is leading in this field. We know the US is coming with us now, that there is a change of an administration. So in one sense, while the pandemic has been extremely difficult, perhaps in a way the changes in the geopolitical space, some good and some not so, allows us to show that the European Union is ready to change, is embracing it, but it's doing it not in a naive way. We're doing it around very strong fundamentals about our economy and our society. And I think we owe it to the next generation to put our economy and society on a firm and sustainable footing for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we're facing a puzzle which needs to accommodate different actors, and the role of the private sector is indeed extremely important. This is a point we'll come back to in the discussion. First, I would like to give the floor to Esther for her kickoff.
Sure, and it seems that we were all triggered, or at least Mairead and I were both triggered by the question mark in the title. And let me give maybe my reply is this time it will have to be different, and for several reasons. The first reason is one that I don't only say as a politician, but also as a mother. We are the last generation that can fix this for our children. It's that simple, and therefore not acting is not an option. Then secondly, and this is very key for the EPP group in the European Parliament, is we want a Green Deal with a business case. So I think that your poll, I'm interested to see what your poll is going to find out, because there are those who say we've been through this crisis now, and now everything should be about economic recovery and no longer about the Green Deal, as if these two things are in opposition. they are not, and at least in the vision of the EPP group in the European Parliament, they should not be. If you can be green with a business case, it means that you have, the smart heads, but also the hardworking hands in Europe that can provide the goods and services of the future, these green and sustainable goods. So always not only the smartest kid in the class worldwide to be competitive, but also the most sustainable, the greenest, the most innovative. So this business case is very serious for us because we know that it won't work if we cannot attract private capital into this whole transition that we're making. And of course, we have to do our own homework as well, right? Our banking sector is not able yet to function perfectly, or it could function better. That means that certain pieces of legislation that are not all the way worked through, such as, for example, on the banking union, that will have to be done. So I'm also critical to my own my own tribe here, the politicians that have to get their act together. The third reason why I think that this time it will have to be different is because basically the European method, the European system is at stake here. You could see that when the crisis hit, there were immediately those worldwide that were saying, oh, look at how slow Europe is, or look at how much time it takes to, get 27 countries to move in the same direction, even on, for example, vaccines. We are now proving that, yes, we had a slow start, but it's actually functioning pretty well, and acting together as 27 makes us stronger. So this underlying fight between systems, what is the best economic system, what is the best societal system, is taking place, underneath this discussion that we're having about the Green Deal. And I would like the Green Deal to be the European way, not the Chinese, maybe not even the American way, although, they are becoming more and more our friends again, which is fantastic. But we should do it our way to prove that this system works. Maybe, I don't know if I dare, but let me draw a parallel to the European Championships that are taking place at the moment. And of course, the Dutch team was kicked out, deservedly so, by the Czechs. And of course, then you get a whole discussion about the trainer. Should he be fired? And how should we build back better? So, okay, the whole discussion is, are we going to go back to the football we had before this tournament, or are we actually firing the trainer in our in our situation and building something for the next tournament that is even better? And I think that is what Europe needs to do as well when it comes to this sustainable recovery. And in the meantime, the Dutch will be supporting the Belgians, of course. So let me leave it at that.
Is there still time, or are we already in extra time when it comes to the green transition?
Oh, we are, I think, in the 92nd minute, and I'm not kidding. This is why I started my intervention with the fact that we are the last generation that can still address this issue. Anything that we are not doing now will be harder for the next generation to fix. So I'm very serious here, but I also know that after this crisis, we have burdened this next generation with a huge amount of debt. And this is an elephant in the European room that nobody would like to address because it makes you unpopular to address it at this stage. I'm not saying we should return to fiscal discipline tomorrow, but I am saying that we should find a very smart and intelligent way to address the issue of debt in the future as Europeans.
Esther de Lange's key messages: we have to find Europe's way, and we're also deep in extra time. Fleur, let me give the floor to you. Ivo, I hope that you don't feel missed here, but the floor goes to Fleur.
Thanks, Dimitar, for having me. Let me take maybe 1 minute to introduce our company, because maybe not all of you might be familiar with AB Inbev, but I do hope that you know some of our beer brands like Stella Artois, Corona, or Budweiser. So we are the world's largest brewer. 1 beer out of 4 worldwide is brewed by one of my passionate colleagues, and at the same time we are rooted very much in Europe, right? So our brewing history goes back 600 years to Leuven, just outside Brussels, where we're still headquartered today, listed on Euronext, and some of our global colleagues are working in Leuven. So very big global footprint, but at the same time anchored locally, right? So we try to source locally, we brew locally, we sell locally, we pay our taxes locally, and we even keep our IP for our brands locally, unlike many other multinationals or maybe tech companies do. So it's an amazing footprint, right? We are very global, but locally anchored, and especially in the area of sustainability, that is very relevant, right? And that brings me to my opening statement, which I wanted to make, and bringing the company perspective here. We are very strong believers, and maybe also proof of the fact that economic recovery, growth, can go hand in hand with an ambitious sustainability agenda. Right, so we've been growing both in terms of volume and value over the last couple of years, COVID year accepted, steadily. And at the same time, we are making huge progress in our sustainability targets, right? I'm just thinking about our emission cuts. For instance, we have been brewing more and more beer, but we've been cutting our emissions in 3 years' time with 25%, right? So we're very proud of that. And that's a little bit the message that I want to convey. And also coming back to the business case and the mindset of the commissioner, we really want to convey the message that sustainability must be seen as a growth opportunity. Right? It's a business opportunity. And to understand that better, we really want to inform other companies and businesses in general to make the right choices, right? If we look at how we can grow, we need to look at the consumers, right? They're the ones who are providing growth. We go where the consumer goes, and the consumer is telling us at the moment that they're looking for more purpose, especially post-COVID. They are wanting sustainable choices. They want to purchase from companies who make the sustainable choices. And the same goes for investors, right? The commissioner was just referring to the taxonomy piece, will be hugely important. And the third reason why companies should look at sustainability as an opportunity, it's because it really is a business case, right? At this moment, we are, for instance, looking at our ETS bill, which comes in every year. We pay for the emissions that we emit, rightfully so. And that bill helps us to make the business case whether or not to buy a new boiler for our breweries, right? If the boiler, let's say, costs $1 million, but in 2 years' time, we will save $1 million in emission rights. It's a no-brainer. The business case is made. However, in order to be able to make all these sustainability decisions, companies need to be able to invest, right? And that's where I believe decision makers come in there to safeguard this the investment space in Europe.
Safeguarding the investment space, also a topic we'll come back to in our discussion. But before that, I would like to give the floor to Ivo, who also has vast previous experience in dealing with these issues. So I'm really curious to hear your views.
Thanks very much, Dimitar, and thanks for the invitation that I accepted on behalf of Vice President of the European Commission, Dubravka, Šuica. And since we last met at the forum in Paris, I don't know if you remember, it was referred to in the introductory video, and I have very good remembrances of that event. A lot has happened, of course. That was like 3 years ago, and the context, as the Commissioner and Esther de Lange already and Fleur indicated, the context has changed considerably. So we're in a different world now. And at the time, Fleur just referred to the ETS. And at the time, 3 years ago, not longer ago, we were working on a very complicated reform of the ETS system, of the European emission trading system, because it was on the verge of collapse after the financial crisis. And to make a long story short, you know what happened. The European Commission took some measures. The market stability reserve had been implemented. I don't want to go too technical, but we saved the ETS from collapse, and we're ready to reform it further in the upcoming weeks even. So, and the 14th of July is indeed a very important date in this respect. Let me say a few words about the introductory question that the previous speakers already referred to. will it be different this time? And I don't want to repeat what the other speakers have said, but it will be different because also of the amplitude of the whole operation, because of the amplitude of the investment of the Resilience and Recovery Fund, the Next Generation EU of 750 billion euros that will be invested. This is a huge difference compared to previous periods. And this money, of course, will have to be invested in, you already referred to, Dimitar, to digitalization. This will have to be invested by member states in digitalization and in green measures. So at least, as we all know, at least 37% of investment has to go to projects that contribute to our European Green Deal, and 20% must go to digitalization. And based on the plans that are that have been tabled and are planned and now tabled by the member states, we see that quite a number of plans are even more ambitious, go beyond these numbers that are that are part of the recovery fund. So this is really positive, and we are talking about very concrete, very tangible projects. We are talking about cross-border projects on renewable hydrogen. We are talking about wind and solar. We're talking about clean transport. So very tangible project for the citizens. And if I may, Dimitar, if you allow me to say one more element, this is not just about industry. This is not just about sustainable energy generation. This is also about citizens, as Commissioner McGuinness said. Let's bring people together with us on this journey, and this is exactly what we want to do. Allow me to refer and to use one sentence to refer to the upcoming strategy, the long-term vision on rural areas, which the College of Commissioners hopefully will endorse tomorrow. So, and that exactly is one of the main purposes, one of the main objectives of the whole investment plan, is to leave indeed anyone behind. And this means that the investment measures, not only the investment measures, but that the legislative package will have to go together with accompanying measures to make sure that the huge impact that these transitions will have on citizens will have to be compensated by accompanying measures on the social level. And last but not different, it will be different, Dimitar, because, and I refer to Esther de Lange, the European Parliament will have a major role in the whole process. It's not for me to say this, but this is a big difference also compared to previous operations. So the European Parliament will, without any doubt, keep the member states and the Commission accountable for the monitoring of the national reform plans, and that structural, that systemic exchange between the institutions with the European Parliament in a primary role will guarantee a successful implementation of this recovery and resilience plan. Back to you, Dimitar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your concise opening. Commissioner McGuinness, I want to turn back to you. I know that you're also pressed for time and that you need to leave a bit earlier. You mentioned the sustainable finance taxonomy of which you're in charge of. Let's talk about some of the potential problems as well. Within the taxonomy, we saw that there's some divisions when it comes to labeling gas and nuclear, whether they're green or transit investment, and this decision was postponed for a later stage. How can we overcome such divisions, and does this clash on the green taxonomy remind us that certain geographical boundaries and certain geographical divisions will be problematic in the long run?
Look, thank you for the question. In my view, politics is about difference. It's about finding solutions to the differences that we have, but you can't have political debate without people coming to the table with different perspectives, or indeed, as you indicate, that some member states are at a different point in the journey towards sustainability. So I'm not troubled by the fact that we have very challenging issues to deal with, but I think it's important to say that we already have a draft delegated act on the table, which doesn't include the sectors you mentioned, but deals with a huge number of other sectors, from forestry to aluminium, to construction, to insurance. And this is a global first. So Europe is the first to publish a green taxonomy, which gives an indication of what is sustainable, but also gives companies the capacity to see how they can plan a journey towards sustainability. To deal then with your question about the difficult issues around some energy choices, Clearly, technology neutrality is a core for the Commission, but there are many different views around both gas and neutral, or rather, and nuclear in this movement towards sustainability. We will be charged in the coming weeks to deal with those sensitive issues and include agriculture in the taxonomy as well. And we will do that in consultation with our platform on sustainable finance, the experts who give us very important feedback. We consult with member states, we consult with the European Parliament, and we do it in the European way, which Esther de Lange has referenced. And the European way is not where we all come to the table and agree wholeheartedly about everything. No, not at all. The European way means that people come to the table with very different perspectives, but that we find a solution that at least allows us move forward together. And I don't underestimate the challenge of that, but I do not think we have any choice but to deal with those challenges in a mature way where we look at the evidence and the information, we look at what is politically acceptable. And you know, one of the biggest challenges for us in all of this, and I think we've all referenced it, is to get people with us on this journey. So not to force either individuals or companies, not to tell them what to do, but to show people the way towards a more sustainable future for our economy and our society. So in my view, dealing with difference is what I've always done as a politician from the early 2000s right up to my role here in the European Commission. And what makes Europe work is dialogue and openness to compromise and find a solution and find a way forward. And with the delegated act that's on the table for the co-legislators at the moment, of course, there are many different views on it. And my perspective on what we already have proposed is that because it is a global first, it gives certainty to the industries that it impacts and to the financial sector about information that allows them make good decisions around sustainability. And we will come with a future delegated act on those areas where there is not agreement, but where we will have to find an agreement. And that's what we are charged to do, whether we're a member of Parliament, a member of the Commission, a member of society. And it's only in the European way that we will make progress. And I think Esther was very right to say that in the beginning of this pandemic, I mean, there were real difficulties across Europe until Europe realized that we were stronger together, whether that was around protective equipment or around vaccination. And on vaccination, can I just say that we are the only global players that not only looked after ourselves, but actually we exported and we supplied vaccines to 90 countries globally, which I think speaks of a European spirit that is not inward looking, but is outward looking, and a European spirit which recognises that we've had the benefits of development and the costs are now climate change, and we recognise we need to lead and show more leadership in this area. So I never worry about differences. I worry when we can't agree, where people leave the table without agreement, but I have a capacity to keep people around the table until we reach an agreement.
Very brief follow-up on the outlook, on the outward outlook you just mentioned. The sustainable taxonomy is a first. Do you think that this could serve as a model for other countries globally to follow and to replicate Europe's framework?
Yeah, I think your question about the global issue is really, really important because Europe doesn't want to go it alone, because alone we cannot make the big changes that the planet needs, the global needs, if you like. So we've worked with an international platform on sustainable finance. The Commission set this up with the very, if you like, aim of getting global partners around the table. And there are many now around the table. We hope the US will join. And the idea is that while we have very high ambitions and we have a path towards sustainability, we want to make sure that there are global standards. And the global standards shouldn't be, if you like, the limit of our ambition, but they should be the floor, the very foundations of what we try to do, so that different jurisdictions, depending on where they are in a development phase, can work from that global standard. And I'm quite confident that this global, if you like, agreement can work better with the current climate, because you have many global players now accepting that what the Paris Agreement says is what we need to do. And therefore, that we will all be looking to one another to make sure that we say that we will achieve what we've set out. And because Europe is leading, we need to continue that leadership, but we want to do it in the global context. And look, we may be looking at other big issues like accounting rules and all of these things that the financial system at the moment have, because what we've done up to now is we've separated, if you like, finance and economics from the natural world. I think the pandemic has shown that the natural world, if you like, seeps into our economies, our businesses, when it goes wrong, when the virus hit and it hit our health and our society, but it hit our industries and our businesses. And I think there's now a better understanding that you cannot really have an economy that doesn't take account of things that are happening in the natural world, whether it's climate or environmental degradation. So what we're looking at here is a global, holistic approach to a sustainable future. And as Esther said, I think her child is younger than my children, but we all see that we want to develop a future for our children, for their sake, rather than just for it to be done. It is the right thing to do, and we just need to make sure that we do the right thing and achieve sustainability.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McGuinness. I appreciate, because I know that you're also pressed for time. Esther, we just talked about the global aspect. Now let's maybe zoom into Europe.
Okay.
The European Commission and national capitals are quite busy drafting and going through the recovery plans, correct? Going through these ambitions, going through these plans, do you think that our ambition is sufficient when it comes to potentially allocated funding? Do we need something else in order to achieve these goals?
Well, that depends on how you look at it. If you only look at the public funding, the answer is very clear. That is not enough to achieve this transition. And this is why I underlined also the need for public finance, for private money, to flow into this project. And that's why Mairead McGuinness's taxonomy is so important. I'm not saying it's easy, Mairead, because indeed there are different opinions on this matter, but it allows, well, let me take a step back. I have the impression that on the taxonomy, often the industry is already further advanced sometimes than the discussions, and I see Mairead nodding, the discussions that we are having as politicians. Because if you speak to investment funds or insurance companies or people that need to invest on their company's behalf, they want guidance. They want clarity that if they invest over a long period of time, they want this investment to be green today, but also still in 5 years and in 10 years. And I know you're forcing me to go to the European level only, but I want to make a step to the global level as well, because I do think compared to the previous administration in the White House, the current Biden administration is very interested in what's happening in the European Union, and in a way that might actually be more dangerous, can I say that? Because the Trump administration was basically looking at us saying, what are the silly Europeans doing? But the Biden administration often is looking at us saying, this is very interesting. There is jobs in there. There's investment in there. Maybe we should copy-paste and beat them at their own game. So we need to be awake here. We're on to something good if we do it in the right way. Let's make sure that Europe keeps this leading role. So that's why the importance of both the public money and the private investments are so key. And turning back to the RRF, to the national plans also that are being submitted by all the member states, some of which, by the way, Mairead, are thousands and thousands of pages if you look into them. What I think is really good is that really there's this focus on digital. There is this focus on sustainability and the Green Deal with the business case. And there have been talks with the European Commission, and things that were not up to scratch have been improved. And I really think there's another strength of this European system. Of course, the European Parliament will continue to have a sharp eye on the European Commission to make sure that these national plans that get approved by the Commission are all up to scratch. So together with my colleague, for example, Siegfried Muresan from the EPP, we're keeping a sharp eye on the Commission still.
Thank you. Before we continue the discussion, let's see what's happening online with our Slido poll and potential questions. Anna, give us an update.
Thank you, Dimitar. Indeed, we do have the results from our Slido poll. Over 50% of our participants, of our online viewers, so close to 60, think indeed that the Green Deal should be one of the key priorities of the European Union, but not the only one, so along with other key priorities. So I think that's definitely some food for thought here. We also have 2 questions from our online viewers, which maybe partially have been answered already, but you can build on them. So the first one is, what specific measures can we implement to ensure post-pandemic recovery is inclusive and covers each generation of European citizens? And the second one is, should the Recovery and Resilience Facility become a permanent instrument in the future? So Dimitar, the floor is yours.
Great questions. Okay, I see the commissioner is still with us, so I would like to make use of her time and give her the second question. Should the RFF be a permanent instrument in the future? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to say that that isn't the question for now. For me, the question now is what Esther referred to, that we need to make sure that the RRF delivers on what we need it to deliver. And that's why there has been real scrutiny of national plans. There's been a lot of discussion between member states and the Commission. And it's why we value the fact that the Parliament will continue to scrutinise, because this was billed as a once-off because of the severity of the pandemic and its economic consequences. But it also showed that in times that are unique and different, because as we said, this time is different, there was a need for a much bigger, bolder response. But I think we now need to make sure that that response delivers on this big objectives that we've set ourselves, a recovery that is sustainable. So when Esther, rightly points to an eye being kept on the Commission in terms of the RRF, I would equally say that we welcome that in the Commission because it strengthens our arm to make sure that the member states who have very strong and elaborate plans for the recovery, who will get both grant aid and loans, or both, that they put them to the use that's on the plan, and that we have these milestones and targets. So, I mean, this is a first, and with every first, there are, concerns about what will come of it. Will it mean more for the future? I think it's always better to focus on the here and now, and to make sure that what we have in terms of this next generation EU, that it translates into a stronger, more resilient, more inclusive European society and economy. And let's talk afterwards about what we might need to do, because there will be time for that conversation. Let's focus now on immediate results.
Thank you very much. And the first question, I think, Ivo, this goes to you. What specific measures can be taken in order to make the green transition more inclusive? And I'm directing the question to you because I know that you're also involved with the Future of Europe conference as well, and how to bring more citizens involved. So what do you think about inclusiveness?
Thanks, Dimitar, and thanks for addressing that issue, because that exactly is one of the main lines, one of the horizontal objectives of the Conference on the Future of Europe. And I'm very glad that you raised it, because the President also referred to it in his introductory speech to this seminar. And we want to thank him for that very much, because he really invited the participants also of this forum and of the Martens Center and everyone who is participating in this seminar, in this webinar, to come on board of that Conference on the Future of Europe that was launched a few weeks ago. The inaugural plenary, where Commissioner McGuinness and also MEP Lange participated, took place in Strasbourg a few weeks ago. And according to myself, to my humble opinion, but I'm deep into this process, of course, it is an innovative process where indeed citizens are at the heart of the whole process. Not only citizens, also civil society. And Fleur will agree with me that also Business Europe is at the heart of this process, of this conference on the future of Europe. Civil society has a central role to play, not only the trade unions but also Business Europe. So, and that is exactly what we want to trigger, is to have that debate on the future of Europe. And you referred to in the Slido questions, you referred to the participants referred to, of course, the importance of the recovery, of a speedy and effective recovery. But when you go to the digital platform of the Conference on the Future of Europe, which has been launched a few weeks ago, as said, and which is operational now and up and running, you can see that not only the recovery, but also health, as the Commissioner has been referring to, security, migration, and also democracy are really at the heart of concerns of citizens, civil society, and all stakeholders. So when we talk about resilience, it's not just a matter of economy, but it's also a matter of democracy, how to make our democratic institutions also on the European level more resilient to cope with the challenges of today. And the best way to do this is to bring people on board, to bring civil society on board, to bring Business Europe on board in order to have the discussion that we want to finalize by spring 2022 under the French presidency of the European Union, which is very soon and very quick. So I invite all participants and also the forum, the Wilfried Martens Center, to come on board and to assist us to contribute on this debate on the future of Europe. Back to you, Dimitar.
Thank you, Ivo, and the message to all of you, join the Future of Europe debate. Now, I'd like to turn to Fleur, because right in the last couple of minutes, we mentioned the private sector a lot, expectations, realities. Maybe tell us a bit more of InBev's experience during and after the pandemic, and also how can the private sector be encouraged to be actively involved in the green transition? When it comes to specific policies, how can the public sector help the private sector?
Thank you. That's the 1 billion question,
yeah.
Right? And I think we all need to work together, both industry, citizens, right? To Ivo's point, citizens play a huge role, right? They indicate the direction both of policymakers and of industry, right? They have a very powerful voice in this debate, but also policymakers and industry need to work together. And if you're asking me what we additionally need at this point as a large industry, we would need from policymakers, first of all, a level playing field. We need from policymakers the time for recovery, very important, right? And especially in our sector, the beer sector and HoReCa in general is very badly hit by COVID. We need to fix our balance sheets. We need to help the 900,000 SMEs who lost their job due to COVID in the hospitality sector. So the recovery fund budget, we need to make sure that that really reaches those smaller enterprises who are there. And then what we ask the policymakers in the light of sustainability, maybe something very concrete, is to greenify our tax system. Right? As a company, we see very much that tax is a huge driver, right, in when we make our decisions. And we see loads of opportunity to modernize the tax system there. I was just understanding from my procurement colleagues that we pay the exact amount of excess duties on our energy bill when it comes to green electricity and grey electricity. But how is that still possible? How is it possible that we pay the same fees for a polluting energy product compared to green energy? So this needs modernization in order for us to facilitate for us certain investment decisions to go towards green electricity, for instance. Because we do feel that we are making, for instance, the choice. Now all our beers in Western Europe as of next year will be brewed with green electricity. But we feel that we are not being helped by policymakers in that area, but many others as well. For instance, when it comes to packaging, recycled content in packaging, etc.
I just want to repeat, close to 1 million people in the hospitality sector lost their jobs in the last year and a half, correct?
Yeah, correct. And it's not...
This is startling.
Yeah, and it's not the, it's not the most resilient jobs that were lost, right? We are talking about a huge percentage of female, unschooled, flexible jobs that need to be now filled again. So again, it's hugely important that support from member states, from the European Union, is really getting to those who really need it badly.
Esther, this is also an extremely important topic. While we implement reforms or when we become really ambitious in Europe, what does it mean for our global competitiveness? Many people are saying that we're going to lose out in the future, especially bearing in mind crazy competition coming from the East and Asia specifically. What to do about global competitiveness, bearing in mind our really ambitious agenda?
Yeah, the biggest, the biggest strength is, of course, to invest in your own competitiveness, right? That is, of course, the first thing you need to do. But then secondly, and I heard the message about the level playing field, and this is something that the EPP has heard loud and clear. This is something that we're always pushing for, and this is not a matter of protectionism. But it's a matter of leveling out something that is not level. Hence the proposal that we are expecting in the context of this Green Deal for a carbon border adjustment mechanism for a number of sectors, which really just evens out the fact that in other parts of the world there is no such price attached to CO2 emissions as we have in Europe. And Ivo Belet was referring to the ETS, Fleur. Basically, it's Ivo's fault that you're now paying 55 euros per ton of CO2 emitted and not 5, because indeed he was responsible in the parliament for fixing that system. But it was the right thing to do, because it gives the people who make your investment decisions the right stimulus to go like, okay, it needs to be cleaner because we will save money. Can I also say something about the taxation? Because that, I think, was also a very valid issue. Of course, when I hear the T word as a European politician, I'm always a bit careful, because taxation systems are, of course, decided at national level. But one of the most important things that were mentioned was the issue of energy taxation. And that is something that the Commission will review, where we do have powers and where we are now in the weird situation that the greener equivalent is not only the same price, but it's actually more expensive. Because we're not taxing the carbon content, but we're actually, or the energy content, but we are taxing the amount that you need. So this is one of our priorities, to level that out, to make that fairer. So yes, it's a global game as well, and we need to protect ourselves or level the playing field where it needs leveling. But I think also my remark regarding the United States is very valid. I have the impression that, yes, the Americans are now on our side, but we should be careful that they're not going to beat us at our own game. And maybe on other issues where it's hard to find a global consensus, think about ETS for aviation, never an easy topic worldwide. If we can't immediately go global, why don't we start transatlantic? A huge number of flights are transatlantic. Can we do, something that is more ambitious than CORSIA, that is something like the EU ETS, together with the Americans? I see also a lot of opportunities at a global level.
Here, I would like to pick your brains a bit. Esther and Ivo, you're seasoned MEPs involved in numerous files and negotiations. The thing which Esther mentioned just now, let's say pushing transatlantic flights to the ETS and also the border adjustment mechanism, basically making sure that third countries who do not have their own Green Deal in place, they need to be charged a specific levy at the border for goods coming in Europe. Wouldn't this be problematic on the trade front? Isn't this something which can open up trade wars in the future? Question to both Esther and Ivo about the European border mechanism, carbon mechanism. Ivo, thoughts on that?
Go ahead.
Yes, I can come in briefly. Of course, this is the right timing to have this debate, and even perhaps a little bit not premature, but you're on top of it, and you're so much on top of it, Dimitar, with this webinar, that it's difficult and delicate to react, because and Commissioner McGuinness referred to it, in less than 2 weeks, on the 14th of July, the European Commission will decide, most probably, on the whole package of Fit for 55, including reform of the ETS system, making it even more ambitious, and on the CBAM, on the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is in the pipeline and which should be decided upon then. So I don't know. I do know, but I can't go into detail of the carbon border adjustment mechanism. But what I can say is what Esther already referred to, is that CBAM won't be, the carbon border adjustment mechanism won't be the panacea for all the challenges that we are confronted with on an international level, but at least it will be an incentive for partners in third countries to come on board with whether a tax or whether in the ETS system on their own. It will oblige them to come on board, and of course CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, will have to be WTO compatible, otherwise it won't fly. And let me add one more element on ETS, because referring to what Esther de Lange said in the previous period in the parliament, and if I'm not mistaken, she was playing also not that a minor role in the reform of ETS, just to underline, and also for Fleur, that the current ETS system, and also in the past, but certainly the current system, is market driven on the one hand, and also the other principle, one of the pillars of ETS is also, and this is very positive for industry, is that it has a benchmark philosophy, meaning that the best performers are rewarded. So when you have a reformed ETS, market driven, combined with an effective carbon border adjustment mechanism, combined also with a lot of investments, I forgot to underline that, a lot of investments in R&D. The current Horizon Europe program is meant to have an investment of 95 billion euros in the upcoming 7 years to make our economy more innovative and more resilient from an innovation point of view. So let's not forget about that too. Back to you, Dimitar.
Thanks, Esther. I was unsuccessful in getting internal information from Ivo on this, but your thoughts as a politician on the border mechanism?
Well, I can imagine that for the Commission, they only have one shot to get this right. Because the eyes of the world are on them. What they're trying to do here, I mean, here the Americans are very outspoken, right? They travel around the world saying this CBAM thing that Europe is cooking up, that's not a good idea. It has to disappear. So we have one shot in getting this right. And therefore, as Ivo said, it has to be WTO compatible. And this will be a big fight. You know, what is the relationship with the free allowances that are currently in the ETS for industry, for energy? It will be, that is my view, but of course we will have to wait 2 weeks to see the final proposal, but it will be a matter of phasing free allowances out while phasing CBAM in. The EPP is fighting very hard not to have an immediate disappearance, like some political groups want, of these free allowances, because that would actually mean that the playing field becomes even less level, that you have kind of a dip when you introduce a new system like CBAM. That we don't want to happen. We want the level of protection or the level playing field situation to at least stay the same while we introduce this new system of CBAM. But we have to be careful. It has to be WTO compatible, and it will do two things. It will either make sure that there will be a calculation made at the border, and those who pay less for carbon in their own region will have to pay. Or those regions will realize that it's easier to also have a cap and trade system or a system that puts a fair price on CO2. I don't care what is the outcome, because the result for industry and for companies in Europe will be the same, and that's why we're doing this exercise.
We're getting closer to the end of our panel, but before we close, Fleur, on the whole question of competitiveness in Europe in the global context, I mean, you represent a European company. In a nutshell, what are the biggest challenges you face from your competitors, and how can Europe keep its competitive vision and role globally in the next decade or so?
So we are a global company, as well as a European company, and that allows us to give an interesting perspective, right? And that really allows us to valorize Europe's initiatives very, very much so. So we know that our colleagues in the US, but also outside the US, our Chinese colleagues, our colleagues in South America and even Africa, are looking at what Europe is doing. They are looking at Europe as the example. They call us and say, what's happening with plastics? Is Europe is taxing plastics? Is this the beginning of a trend? Will this come to us? Can you explain to us how that works? Right? And this allows this global view helps our company to be ahead of, to be a front runner in this area of sustainability, and I believe that's why it's important that Europe remains playing that role as front runner on the policy scene as well.
Can I ask you a question to Fleur? Yeah, because
quick
there's
one.
Very quick one. There's also this debate about labeling, sustainable products in terms of their carbon performance. That is top down. Is that a good thing or a bad thing from your perspective?
We're all looking at it.
Yeah.
We applaud a PEF system for at least so our consumers know what is environmentally friendly and what is not, right? Because now they cannot see, there's just too much guidance from them. We want to inform our consumers in a correct way. And if I think about PEF and how it will be implemented, one important thing that I would recommend policymakers is to align it with, for instance, international reporting standards. So we put in we don't make it too burdensome for the companies, and to be able to implement it quick, right? But definitely a fan, and our global colleagues around the world are monitoring PEF developments closely as well.
Okay. Thanks.
I think we can continue this debate for hours on end, but here we must pause and finish this panel. I think that we heard a couple of extremely important messages from our panelists. Economic recovery and growth can actually go hand in hand with a sustainable agenda. Sustainability actually has a business case, and this is extremely important. Europe is in a privileged position to push the global debate and influence other countries on sustainability. And we also had a fantastic pledge by all speakers that this time it will be different. Fleur, Esther, Ivo, Commissioner McGuinness, thank you very much for this panel. Thank you to our audience, and back to you, Anna, for our second panel.
Thank you, Dimitar. This was such a great debate.